Hi, I'm Brian Crombie, and we're going to be talking on The Brian Crombie Show. We're going to be talking about politics, arts, business, and social issues on The Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. And welcome to The Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. So the federal election just was over a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to bring in a gentleman that I think extremely highly of, who was a conservative candidate in Mississauga Lakeshore, regrettably was unsuccessful. I wanted to chat with him and find out, how the campaign went, what he thought about the leader, what he thought about the leaders, about the party policies, and whether he'll run again. So I want to introduce you to Michael Rass, who is the Conservative Party candidate in Mississauga Lakeshore in the last federal election. Michael, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
So congratulations on a hard-fought campaign.
Hard fought, but there's no prize for second place, I suppose.
Well, I think that I think you impressed a lot of people.
Thank you.
I have to tell you, I live in your riding, and I spoke to a lot of people, and a lot of people thought that you would win or thought that you would get very close, and you were 3,500
thereabouts
or so votes behind in an election where you didn't win. The Conservatives didn't win one riding in the 905. And I thought if you won one in the 905, or at least in Peel, at least.
Yeah, we won some in the 905. We're not successful in Peel and Halton, which is
Peel and Halton. I thought you would be, frankly, the riding that would go first, because it tends to be, I think, the more conservative of the ridings. And so therefore, I think you had a good chance just from the numbers.
Sure.
And then you've been involved in the community, and people know your name and people know you. And so I think that you had a good chance of being victorious. But you weren't. And Aaron O'Toole, a lot of people thought he was going to be a breakthrough in the 905 and in Peel and Halton, and he wasn't. What do you think were the reasons why?
A lot of reasons. This wasn't the change election that I think we probably need in order to pick up seats that are on the margin like this one. There was, in the first 2 weeks of the campaign, when the issues were on economy, on some of the issues that we were putting forward, then we were winning. The polls showed that we were tied or better in this riding. But then when the last 2 weeks of the campaign came around, when it was back on a campaign about COVID and campaign on about stability, I think Canadians said, especially those in the 905 that were not yet aware of or not yet comfortable with Aaron and the candidates like myself, those folks went back to the Liberals, and they went with what they knew, the devil they knew versus the unknowns. So there was that dynamic in the course of the campaign. I don't think it was anything in particular wrong with our campaign. It was just the timing of it.
Right. So let me ask you a couple questions. There was a fairly lengthy article in the Toronto Star that I'm not sure if you've seen that went through a whole review of the campaign, and I've had the privilege of interviewing a couple different people in regards to what happened. And let me ask you a couple of the issues that came out. So one of them was that the first couple of weeks it was, as you say, on economy and policy, and then the Liberals went negative. And they went negative against Aaron O'Toole on a couple of what they called policy flip-flops. Right. One was on assault weapons, another one was on abortion, and another one was really on demanding vaccinations from all of the Conservative candidates. How do you think those played?
Well, they played in terms of those were issues where we were on the defensive versus being on the offensive. And so those played in a riding like Mississauga Lakeshore as ones where we had to explain. And there's an old adage in politics is when you're explaining, you're losing.
Yeah.
And so when I was at the door and explaining, I wasn't then talking about our message, our positive messages. So that was a challenge. And it was unfortunate that the entire campaign ended up turning on something, for example, on assault weapons, where I don't know the exact number, but I kind of euphemistically said, it's kind of unfortunate that an election turned on the course of a gun that has absolutely nothing to do with the criminal element of what's happening. Handguns are the problem, and we're not addressing those problems. Yeah. And we're turning on a weapon that less than 500 people in the country own. Or maybe it's 1,000, whatever the case may be. It's a small number of the people that own. In fact, I would be willing to wager that maybe a dozen people in the entire riding of Mississauga Lakeshore own one of these.
What made it so controversial was that it was actually the weapon used, when was it, 20 years ago in l'école politique in Montreal.
And I think no one on our side was talking about, letting those weapons back into circulation. That was never the issue. The issue was that the Liberal plan for gun control, introduced a couple of years ago by way of regulation, was all symbols, all symbolic action, and no real substantive action. And we were talking about making substantive action, and it ended up being, apparently Canadians, or at least the ones that were following this issue, wanted the symbolic action rather than the real action. And we weren't strong enough, I don't think, in talking about the real action. You asked me the question on your radio show, what do you believe in gun control? And my answer was a quick and quip, saying I want effective gun control. And I think I still believe that, and I think that would have been a better and stronger answer for us.
But he didn't seem to answer it well, and actually, took the criticism of being a flip-flopper, and then the Conservative Party actually changed its policy. Did that resonate with people?
I think it probably did, and I think again, I wasn't in the war room, but I know that there was a lot of debate about how best to respond to the issue. And hindsight's always 20/20, and even those in the war room that I've spoken to have admitted that it wasn't their finest hour, but there was a lot of other circumstances.
Should he have demanded that all candidates get vaccinated? Was that, in the end, was that an issue, that there were supposedly 10 to 20 candidates that refused to get vaccinated?
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Conservative candidates.
I understand, but I think the position that the Conservatives took was the correct one, which is to say, the issue of vaccination should never have been an election issue to begin with. What worked for me in my conversations with people at the door was to sort of point out that it was the Liberals, it was Justin Trudeau who on July 13th, just a month before he called the election, said, we will never have a vaccine mandate in this country. It would divide the country. And then on August 13th, he did exactly the opposite. He introduced a vaccine mandate, said that we'll have it for candidates, et cetera, et cetera. He drove that wedge in order to win an election.
Okay, but in the
That's
end,
despicable.
Should have Aaron O'Toole, it sounds like the chairman of the campaign, according to the media reports, demand the vaccine. He supposedly actually asked the candidate in Northwest Territories to not run.
Yeah, I don't know what the circumstances were behind those conversations. I wasn't privy to them, so I won't get into those. I personally believe that our position was the correct one, which was to leave it up to
correct, but it led to problems. So do you think he should have demanded in the end?
No, because if you demanded it, you were being hypocritical to the position. The position was that a vaccine mandate was.
So if you didn't demand it, you had to explain it better. But then if you're explaining it, you're losing.
Well, that's true.
Comment.
That's true, and this is the frustrating part about this campaign, is that on the issues that matter most to Canadians in terms of the future of the country, that's not what we're talking about. We did for the first 2 weeks of the campaign, and within those 2 weeks we were winning. But then when the Liberals went negative on us and drove it onto issues that, by the way, were not about what they wanted to talk about in the election, we were backsliding, which was frustrating.
One of the things that came out in the media reports that I was really kind of surprised by is that the Conservatives, Aaron O'Toole, ran almost a Biden-like campaign where he did the vast majority of his events from a ballroom, media room, and Trudeau was running like Trump, not completely with huge events, but was out there meeting people in events, even though we were in the middle of COVID. And do you think Aaron O'Toole was right to spend, I can't think it was 19 days he spent in a ballroom in the basement of the Westin Hotel in Ottawa, from a TV studio?
Yeah, but that TV studio was reaching like 20, 30, 40,000 people a night, if in some cases more. And so I think that's the balance.
Do you think it was a good strategy?
I think it was a good strategy. Maybe I might not have used the same number of days, whatever. That's beside the point. I think that they were getting ready for what they expected to be more of a COVID election versus the traditional election, and I think they reached more people. It drove a data strategy and all the voter identification strategy and things like that, which are the inner machinations of the campaign. I think in general they tactically ran a good campaign. I would have liked to have seen.
So tactically on that one, apologies to interrupt.
That's right.
But again, media reports, and I'm asking what you know, that Aaron O'Toole spent time in the last week in ridings that he never could have won. And Trudeau was always in those marginal winnable ridings. And it was almost as if the Tories didn't have good analytics and the Liberals had great analytics.
No, I think that the Tories were going into ridings that were competitive. Aaron was going into ridings that were competitive. He came into Mississauga Lakeshore. We didn't end up winning. Was that a waste of his time? Certainly wasn't from my perspective. Yeah. I welcomed him in the riding.
Should have been. Mississauga Lakeshores, if the Tories are going to win a minority government, or for sure a majority government, They have to win Mississauga Lakeshore.
Sure.
If you don't win Mississauga Lakeshore, you're not winning government.
Sure.
You know,
And
and frankly, I think you need to win 2 of Mississauga and maybe 1 of Brampton. Like you've got to
probably.
win a third appeal if you're going to win government.
Probably.
And if you don't win any in Peel or Halton,
Right.
how can you possibly win government?
Right. And so on the last day of the campaign, or second last day of the campaign, he was in Oakville, which was another similar seat to Mississauga Lakeshore. He went there looking for that seat, and I think that was in play. He then went to Vaughan. Those were seats that were in play. So I don't have any quibble with the strategy in that respect, in terms of what goes on into these things.
But he lost Aurora, and he lost Markham. Markham was an independent, Aurora was a conservative.
Correct.
He won Thornhill, but Thornhill was conservative before.
Was conservative, exactly. Markham is one of those seats that media reports have also pointed out to say that there were anomalies related to the Chinese vote, for example, the Chinese Canadian vote that was lost. I certainly saw a little bit of evidence of that as well in this riding. We don't have a large Chinese Canadian population in Mississauga Lakeshore, but those that I spoke to, I had to dispel a lot of myths. So there was some myth making going on, and I suspect some shenanigans that were happening at that level as well.
We're chatting with Michael Raz, the Conservative Party candidate in the last federal election, about what happened in the last federal election and why the Conservatives didn't do better in Mississauga and national-wide. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a break. When we come back from the break, I'm going to ask Michael what we need to do in the future. What's going to happen here in Toole, what's going to happen to the Conservative Party, what's going to happen to the politics. Stay with us.
She knows who she is. She knows who we are. How tough this pandemic has been and what needs to be done to get us back on track. Andrea Horvath is a fighter for people, for workers on the front lines, families trying to find a home they can afford, seniors who deserve better care, and kids needing safer schools and a future to look forward to. Fierce, loyal, optimistic.
I'm Andrea Horvath. I'm proud to be on your side.
A message from Ontario's NDP.
Hi, I'm Brian Crombie, and we're going to be talking on the Brian Crombie Show. We're going to be talking about politics, arts, business, and social issues on the Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. Crombie Show on Canada One TV. I'm really trying to understand what happened in the federal election, and we've been chatting with Michael Raz, who is the former Conservative candidate in Mississauga Lakeshore in the last federal election. I'm hoping he's going to be in the next federal election, but we'll talk to him about that in a minute. And we've spent the last couple of minutes talking about what happened and what went wrong for the Conservative Party in the last election. And now I'd like to switch, Michael, if we could, to what you think is going to happen in the future. And there's been a bunch of people that have been talking about the Conservative Party, and that you won the popular vote across the country.
That's right.
The problem is your vote's not very efficient, because you win a ton of votes in Saskatchewan and Alberta, and some in rural Ontario and other rural parts, Atlantic Canada, etc.
Yeah.
And then you just don't win enough in urban and suburban Canada, particularly Toronto and Vancouver. And there's so many seats in the Greater Toronto area. And a lot of people say the 905 is the route to government, and you didn't win many in the 905. What are you going to have to do? And let me ask you, based on a couple of questions.
Sure.
Some people think Aaron O'Toole's strategy of moving to the center was the right strategy, and that you need to do that to win suburban Toronto.
Yeah.
Other people say no. The Conservatives got to stay true to what their background and their history has been, and you should be a right-wing party and appeal to your base, and you didn't motivate your base enough, and in fact you lost votes to the PCP and the Wexit party, which I think ended up being called the
Mavericks,
the
yeah,
Mavericks
yeah,
or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's one issue, and then another issue that came up was that you didn't appeal to new Canadians, ethnic Canadians, nearly enough. And then the third issue I heard a lot of is that you got to stop appointing or electing or nominating people that look like you and me. Too many middle-aged old white guys. And that you need more females and more new Canadians as candidates, and maybe even as leaders. So what do you think about those 2 points? Going to the center versus staying true to your roots. The idea of ethnic appealing to ethnic people, and then appointing ethnic or female people.
So let me address the first of those, which is the center, left, right, that type of thing. I actually don't look at it in that paradigm. I thought our conservative platform was a good conservative platform, and it was not about moving to the center. It was about moving to the suburbs. It was about finding contemporary conservative solutions to contemporary problems. We needed a conservative solution, a conservative answer to climate change. We needed a conservative answer to childcare, and we found those. We were criticized for being, moving to the center, moving to the left. I don't see it in that respect. I actually quoted Darrell Bricker, who said it was not a move to the left. It was a move to the suburbs. It's about location.
That's a good line.
It's about location, not about ideology.
But you didn't win the suburb.
But we made progress. And I think in a different context and a different campaign, that progress would continue. And that progress needs to continue over the next couple of years. A couple of things are contextually that are important in this. Aaron won the leadership last year, right at the sort of the height of COVID. He actually had his first face-to-face caucus meeting with his caucus after this last election, just last week. Up until then, he's only ever met his own caucus via Zoom calls. It's hard to build those connections, hard to build that team camaraderie. Similarly, it's hard to do the campaign and the outreach that you need to do. And that, to your second point, is what I think has to happen both from the leader and all the candidates all the way on down, is that outreach. It takes time. Coming out of the 2015 campaign, we lost some ground in those various communities. The cultural snitch line, all the type of thing, is something that I still heard about in my outreach in this riding to the cultural communities, particularly the Muslim community, particularly to South Asian, those types of communities. And I think we need to invest and double down on investing into those communities. Part of that investment needs to be the recruitment of candidates who don't look like you and I. I fully appreciate that and I get that. But it also means that candidates who do look like you and I need to spend more time building those relationships, building that rapport, building our teams out. Yeah. My team was a little too old, white, and stale, and I needed to find those new Canadians. So I was quite proud of the fact that the team that I ended up recruiting around me by the end of the campaign, or from the early stages right towards the end, were a lot of younger people, a lot of visible minorities, a lot of gender and sexuality was represented on my campaign, and I was really proud of that. And I think we need to do a whole lot more of that. And that's something that I'm committed to doing in the local riding association, and for me as a candidate going forward as well. But again, to your point about finding more candidates who can represent that, the candidates that we had in Peel did represent that milieu. Vietnamese Canadian candidate in Mississauga, Erin Mills, Jamaican Canadian candidate, or at least Caribbean Canadian candidate, I'm not sure if she's Jamaican, in Mississauga, Cooksville, South Asian candidate in Mississauga, Streetsville. So we had a good representation of those candidates. I don't think they just got enough profile and got out into the community enough.
Right. I understand Aaron O'Toole is number one going to face a caucus vote, and then number two, leadership review. Mm-hmm. Will he survive?
I think so. I don't think our party has any appetite to change horses right now. There are always elements in a political party, especially one like ours, that has open and public debates on these issues and on leadership. We love our leadership campaigns, but I don't think there's any serious threat to unseating him at this point. I'm certainly not going to be calling for that. In fact, I'm quite publicly backing Aaron because I think he's a strong leader, and once Canadians get to know him a little bit better, we'll get there. The polling that I've seen shows that Aaron was the only person in the race of any of the leaders that gained ground. The negatives on Justin Trudeau went up. The negatives on Jagmeet Singh basically stayed the same.
But he did worse than Andrew Scheer. And people argued that he was going to be the person that was going to win you the 9 to 5. He was going to be the person that moved you to the center. He was going to be the person that was going to solve the problems that Andrew Scheer had of being
different context.
Too religiously right, too rural, too conservative, etc. And he did worse than Andrew Scheer.
No, he didn't. In the context of percentage-wise, in the areas that we need to grow in Quebec and Ontario, we grew. So we did slide a little bit in Alberta and BC, so the efficiency of our vote was less efficient, so in that respect. But in terms of their overall voter turnout across the country was down. We did have some different dynamics this time around, especially with respect to COVID. We faced structural changes and differences in a lot of ridings. I can tell you in Mississauga Lakeshore, the strongest, bluest area where Stella Ambler, the previous candidate, did the best were the areas of the riding that had to travel the furthest in order to go vote because of the voter locations moved. So that had an
I
impact
was
on...
actually surprised how far I had to drive to vote.
Precisely.
I couldn't have walked it too. There's no way.
Precisely. I mean, if you know Mississauga, you know that the QEW is under construction. All of it is under construction right now. And I had the strongest parts of my riding had to travel to the other side of the riding through that construction traffic on election day. Other parts of the riding had to travel, in rush hour traffic would have taken 20 and 30 minutes at least to get there, let alone to vote and then come back. That had a voter suppression issue
So did the
amongst
Liberals do a better
Tories.
job? Did the Liberals do a better job with mail-in votes?
I think marginally. I think both of us, both the Liberals and the Conservatives were focused
Or
on
advanced
those.
polls?
And the advanced polls, we were focused on those as well. I think our Get Out the Vote campaigns on both the Liberals and Conservative side were
So
quite
those that
good.
are calling and saying Aaron O'Toole did worse than Andrew Scheer, that he's looks like you and I, and that's not the way to win. Particularly if you've got a young, dynamic leader of the Liberal Party and of the NDP. So therefore, maybe what you need is a younger, more dynamic, maybe a female, maybe an ethnic individual, and that you need to dramatically change your appeal to new Canadians. You don't think calls for a leadership vote and potentially a new leader?
No. I think Aaron is the right leader to take us forward. I think to augment him needs a stronger team around him. And so new candidates and new MPs such as Melissa Lanceman, a young, dynamic woman from north end of Toronto, the York region, Thornhill riding, will be featured in our caucus going forward and show that we are a new party that is looking to reach into those communities. I know I'm going to be doing my bit to reach into those communities and having those hard conversations and make sure that we're engaged in that dialogue with those Canadians, whatever community it might be, to make sure that they can feel comfortable coming back to us. And that's the point. It's coming back to us. It's not that we're reaching into these communities for the first time. It's that we had them. We had their support. We had their confidence. Lost it a little bit. We need to get it back now.
Maxime Bernier and the PCP went to, what was it, 8% of the vote.
Thereabouts, yeah.
Dramatically, bigger than the Green Party, and dramatically bigger than last time. And the Maverick Party didn't do nearly as well at West as some people thought, but still took some votes away from you in Alberta. And it's interesting because there were some reports, and I think you and I have talked about this previously, that suggested that what Aaron O'Toole was doing was following the David Cameron strategy, who a Conservative Prime Minister, leader of the Conservative Party Prime Minister in the UK, that took the Conservative Party in the UK to the centre and had this strategy of modernizing it, making it younger, taking it to the centre as well. And the reports were saying if he's successful, it'll be a good strategy.
Sure.
But if it's unsuccessful, frankly, you'll go comparable to what happened in the UK ultimately, to a more Trump-like, very right-wing, more partisan, more political, Kevin Johnston kind of attitude.
Yeah. No, I don't think that's a real threat here in Canada. First of all, Boris Johnson. Yes, exactly. Another also crazy Mississaugian former. No, I don't think I reject that sort of analysis.
So you don't think you have to go back and appeal to the Maxime Bernier type of people and the what is it, Richard Hillier, the
Randy Hillier,
Randy Hillier, the right-wing Maverick people and the Wexit people. You don't need to go back and get them back in your fold and go farther right-wing again.
No, because I think, first of all, the thing about Maxime Bernier is that Maxime Bernier is all about Maxime Bernier. He's not actually a conservative. He was a separatist before he became a conservative, and then as soon as the Conservatives rejected him, he became his own party. He's all about himself. And so as soon as he disappears, that whole movement, the PPC, I think, disappears. Some of the others on the far right, I think that circumstance changes in an election that's not about COVID. So I think that changes in that kind of context. Where I do think we need to make sure we're appealing or making sure we're reaching out to is our Conservative base by helping them understand that the platform that we had put forward is in fact a Conservative platform.
Some of them were worried that it wasn't.
Right.
Thought it was too progressive, thought it was too left.
I heard this all the time. It's like, Conservatives have never stood for a carbon tax. Well, the father of the carbon tax in Canada is Preston Bloody Manning.
Yeah.
Right? So it was a Conservative solution in that it was never a carbon tax, the carbon pricing.
Having the market decide is
Having the market decide.
Conservative solution.
Absolutely. So we
Okay.
need to sort of put that back on the
Last
agenda.
question, most important question.
Sure.
Is your name going to be on the ballot in 2 to 4 to whatever years it is?
I can't predict that far into the future. So what I said on election night, and I've repeated a number of times since then, a couple things. I'm going to make sure that I work hard to make sure that whoever is the candidate in Mississauga Lakeshore is ready next time. We're going to have the money, the people, the processes, all that stuff taken care of. I will do the hard work that's necessary to get there, but I can't make an absolute 100% commitment because I don't know what my life looks like in 2 years, 4 years, whatever time frame. I don't know where I'll be in family and career and all those other things. But I put my signs in storage.
Good, good. Well, as I think you know, you and I have different political ideology, but I've had the utmost respect for you. I think
Thank
you're
you.
an incredibly interesting, thoughtful, articulate person, and you're the type of person that should be in Parliament.
Thank you.
And I hope in the future that we see you in Parliament.
Thank you. I've heard that a lot, but it's no prize in second place. But anyway.
Well, Michael Rass, the former Conservative candidate for Mississauga Lakeshore, and I hope he's a candidate in the future. And I do think if you see his name on the ballot, you should give him and his policies a good, serious look, because this man is someone that would represent us well in Ottawa or Queen's Park or wherever else he may choose to be politically active. Anyway, that's our show for tonight. Thanks for joining us. It's the Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. Good night, everybody.